What's going on, people, and welcome to Man Knows Football. You're here with myself, Guni, and Mike has made his return to the channel. He has got a video from a long time ago. I think it was like before I even had a couple thousand subscribers. Mike is an OG of this channel in that respect, so it is good to have you back, Mike. How you doing, man?
I'm all good, man. Glad to be back. Very glad to be back.
Yeah, back under very different circumstances as well, man. It's really been a long time since we've spoken on camera about Chelsea. We were in a different regime altogether when we last spoke. The problems are completely different back then, as you know, compared to what they are now. But before we do get into more of an in-depth discussion, I do have to tell the peoples to obviously do the formalities. Hit that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up as well. Leave your thoughts down there in the comments. Today, I'm actually quite excited to have this conversation with Mike. He has a footballing opinion that I respect very much. If you guys follow me on Twitter, you'll see that I retweet a lot of his stuff. I'm very much tuned into Mike's spaces. So if you are on Twitter as well, make sure you do follow Mike. I will have his social medias down there in the description. Clickable links, as always. I do all the work for you. Take you straight to Mike. Give him a follow. I promise you, he will not disappoint you. Let's get into it, Mike, man. Let's hit a bit of the pastime road before we build up into where we are now as Chelsea. We're gonna go into just a bit of the process during the takeover. We're not gonna go during that process. I'm not gonna rehash that. Let's talk about when Todd Boehly freshly took over the club and the decisions that were being made during that time. Some of the transfers that were made. You know, several of them have been moved on already. Do you know what I mean? Is that an admission of mistakes? So there's a lot of questions for me to ask you during around that time. But let's just start off with how you felt at first when he first came in and these type of decisions were being made.
So when they were first appointed
Yes.
as the new owners, I was happy because they were the ones that I wanted out of the ones that were in the running. In terms of the stuff that was going on at the time, some of the decisions in terms of the transfers I agree with, some I didn't. The main thing that I knew, and it's basically common knowledge now, is that they essentially handed Tuchel the rein to do not to do what he wanted, but they were like, what do you want? And then we'll go out and we'll find stuff for you, and then we'll present it to you. Do you want this? So like he essentially had the keys. That's why, do you remember like this time last year, I was really up against like the decisions that were being made by him and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I didn't understand what he was doing. And I was like, this guy can't last. He can't build a squad because he essentially had free reign. And then he was fine with it at first, but then he lost it and started complaining and saying like, oh, I don't want to do any of this, blah, 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 blah. And it was like, well, you should have said something in the first place then. You know, you can't say, yeah, this is great. Because I'll be honest with you, pretty much most or every manager in the world worth their salt would want the opportunity that was granted to him last summer. So, you know, and I think you can see it's quite evident, you know, past and even now that this guy is just incapable of building a squad correctly. So unfortunately, some of the stuff that we were left with, as you said, rightfully about how some of the players have been moved on that were brought in last summer were unfortunate mistakes. And we're lucky that the owners essentially decided to hold it and move on from those mistakes. I think one thing that they've taught us in this small sample size of them being here is that they are not afraid to correct their mistakes, essentially, in one way or another. And people get frustrated about like, oh, you know, why hasn't this been done yet? Why has that not been done yet in terms of like moving a player on? And sometimes I'm the same because you get caught up in the moment. But if you really compare it to a lot of other teams and even our past regime at the speed in which they do these things, it's quite unbelievable, really. Like I was saying to some of my mates that the summer that we've had now in terms of the outgoings, I never thought that we would be where we are. I generally was like, I sort of came to the conclusion before the summer even started that I'm going to tell myself that there's going to be a couple of players here that just won't get moved on because it's just impossible logistically. But every single one that I've wanted out, you know, I know you could argue the likes of maybe Lukaku, Hudson-Odoi or Sarr, but in terms of being involved with the squad and actually being moved out the door, they've essentially all gone. It's incredible, really.
And in terms of those players, you're more referring to those sort of mainstays that were in the first team that you
Yeah.
felt were difficult to get out. So I know there were several players in there that I shared a similar, I thought similar to. One of them obviously being Jorginho. I am happy that he's out of the door finally. As Piliqueta, as much respect as I've got for him as a servant for the club, it definitely was overdue for him to be leaving. I think the majority of us can agree with that as well. And then there's several other players as well that are in that mix. One more is Kepa. For me, I'm slightly disappointed that it's not an obligation to buy, but it's Real Madrid. His wages are off the books. It does help us. Even if it is in the short term, it still does help us. Hopefully, he'll perform over there to get himself a more permanent move. If not at Real Madrid, somewhere else. He'll be on the last year of his contract next summer. Hopefully, he can work something out. Maybe reduce his wage demands. You never know. Do the honourable thing and just leave us alone. We don't want you no more over here at Chelsea, respectfully. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, no, I hear you. But let's just talk about the lead up to Pochettino, because it's actually very interesting, because you are. I don't know if this is the right term, but you're pretty much a pioneer in this whole Pochettino thing. I say that because you're the first voice that I ever heard say, I want Pochettino as Chelsea manager. And we're not talking like 3 or 4 months ago, people. We're talking possibly years ago. I don't know how long you was on this train for, but when I heard it, it was probably just like a year or maybe just over a year ago. But I'm assuming that you was probably talking about it for longer than that. But let's just rewind a little bit. Todd Boehly era, obviously, the Thomas Tuchel situation. He got sacked, and then what was the sequence after that? It was Graham Potter that came in, and then it was Bruno that took over for one game. Then it was Frank Lampard. Now we're here at Pochettino. But just talk me through your thoughts of those process. Obviously, Thomas Tuchel first, then moving on to Graham Potter, and then we'll work from there.
So just quickly when Tuchel went, so it was a case of like, I think after that couple of the first games of the season, and some of the noises I was hearing in the background about how like he wouldn't even speak to the owners and stuff like that. As soon as I heard that, I was like, it's a case of when, not if. And I was just waiting for it to happen. I already knew the season was basically, our season had a huge dent in it. I like it to Man United now. I think they're going to have a bit of a difficult season. I can sort of see it bubbling under there. And I felt like that. I was like, it's over before it's even began. When that happened, and then they went and appointed Potter really quickly, I was a massive advocate for it because I'd seen what he'd done at Brighton. I know a lot of people disliked him from the off, and obviously a lot of people turned on him. He did think a lot of things that disappointed me because he didn't stick to the principles that I thought that he had, which was a shame. He went down that rabbit hole with the players that were still here. I was a bit disappointed in that respect, but I understand why they did it. I mean, hindsight would say maybe it probably would have been best to wait until the structure was more in place, which we see it is now. Because if you compared our summer signings to, say, our January signings, there's a massive difference. There's a massive difference, even to the summer signings now, and even some of the youth signings. If you look at it, it's a massive difference. But I understand why they did it, because Aston Villa were basically moving in on him at the same time, because Steven Gerrard had just been sacked as well. I think he'd been sacked either just before or just after Tuchel. I can't remember. I think it was just before, because Potter was appointed very, very quickly. And they felt, after doing their own due diligence, talking to people, networking, blah, 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 because they were speaking to a lot of people in the game. Like, do you remember there was all those like pictures of Boehly and stuff in meetings with multiple agents, multiple owners? He was basically essentially networking. They thought that they better take a punt on Graham Potter because this guy was the next thing. Like, he was going to be like the next Pochettino, if you like, in terms of like he'll get to the next bit. The same way Arsenal probably took a punt on Arteta. Yeah, exactly. And I got why they did it. Even though Pochettino was in the running then, it was a very different landscape, and they thought they better strike while the iron was hot. And obviously, you look back in hindsight and you think maybe that wasn't the best idea, but I get why they did it. And also, like I said, Villa, who do have a lot of money behind them, as they've shown, he was the first choice to replace Gerrard. So they thought they better move now, so they don't have to, so they can just get it and maybe try and get our season back on track, essentially, because we were still in the Champions League, we were still in cup competition, so they hadn't even really started yet. Obviously, it didn't work out, and then it was a situation where that position became sort of untenable because of the way the fans were, especially in the ground. And I thought, okay. And I was surprised. I thought they'd stick it out, but then it was like, okay, it is what it is. Received a lot of like, oh, you backed Potter and all this, but I was like, yeah, whatever, I don't care, I'll take that. But I understood why they did it at the time, and I said I like this, but I was disappointed in him more than anything else. And then the Lampard thing, I mean, the season was done anyway, like it was over, so it doesn't really matter who they put in there. They could have put in like the groundsman. It wouldn't have really mattered. Like, nothing was happening, and I thought at least by that point that we wouldn't see a lot of the players that we were unfortunately being like tortured by seeing. So like Kepa would be dropped, etc., etc. But Lampard did a complete 180, and I was so disappointed with him. Like, I love the man, and I love him as a player, and I even really like him as a pundit as well when he's done punditry. But I try and remove that memory of him out of my mind. I'm going to try my hardest, because the things he was doing and saying were just horrendous. It was like an insult, and I think it was what it was. You know, because it's a dog-eat-dog world, especially in football. If you look between the lines, I think what he was doing, he was trying to basically repair his own managerial career, right? So he was probably doing things like the Kepa situation, right? So he was probably doing something like, this is a player I fell out with before, who I dropped completely before. So it might look better on me when I come back to reinstate him, to say, oh, I give players second chances. Do you know what I mean? So like, to any potential employees in the future, because he was never going to be at Chelsea long term. It was just an interim
Definitely
job.
not.
It would look like, oh, okay, you know, that's something we can like put on the plus list. That's a tick sort of thing for the CV. It sounds so trivial and stupid, but I think if you look between the lines, a lot of it was like that.
No, fair play. I mean, you know, with Frank as well, it just got to a point where, like, Mike, I don't know about you, like, regardless of who he came up against, I just had absolutely no faith whatsoever.
Oh yeah.
Like, you'd have the optimism before the game through the principle that you're a fan, you want to be optimistic, get behind the team, you don't want to be negative. But deep down, we was always going into games like, I can't even see it, you know. Can't even see where we're going to get the win from. And that's not entirely on Lampard, but, you know, how he conducted himself, some of the decisions he made certainly didn't help him. I was very disappointed during his second stint at Chelsea. And to be fair, if he thought he was trying to repair his managerial career, I think he came off a lot worse than before he went into the club. Because honestly, like, anyway, the less said, the better. It is still Frank Lampard, so I'm not really going to go there with him. I'm going to give him that respect. But season over, there was the debate. Why didn't Pochettino come in straight away and put his hands on the Chelsea team? You know, if he was a manager that had any kind of cojones, he would have just come in and done it. Did you agree with that statement at the time? Or did you feel like it's better that this guy just rides out the season and waits till the end of it?
No. I was very, very happy that once they decided it was him, that they just let the season finish, because I did not want him to have any kind of anything against his name, or like a black mark against his name, because you know what fans are like. You see them now, like after a couple of games, they lose their shit. Because what I didn't want is, because a lot of the players in there, they didn't want to be there anymore, and they were there, and I did not want Pochettino, a manager I've wanted at Chelsea for so long, to have that against his name, where he has to deal with those horrendous players. It might get his back up against the wall, sets it off to a bad stead anyway. And then you get the idiot fans be like, well, in the last 2 or 3 games of the season, we played like that and we lost these games. So then even going into pre-season, there would have been like that pressure on his back by like the idiots that unfortunately plague our fan base. And I did not want that. And I wanted a complete clean slate with as many players out the door before he came in, which is essentially what it was. I mean, there was a couple still hanging around, like Kepa and stuff, but majority of them were gone. Like Aspilicueta was gone, Kovacic was gone. All of these guys, they were gone. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, fantastic, brilliant. And everyone, I mean, I don't know about you, but overall, Nkunku injury aside, I thoroughly enjoyed preseason. It was the first time in a long time I did, and I feel like most of the fans did. So. You know, I know it's only preseason, but it felt refreshing.
It did, yeah. It did. It was good to see. It was good to actually see, you know, fluid attacking patterns of play, young, exciting players playing for the first time at Chelsea in some cases, gelling well with their fellow new signings, man. And you know, a lot of us who know Pochettino's reputation knew that that's not a fluke. Do you know what I mean? That is something that is definitely been implemented by the manager. And even off the pitch, you could just see by the general body language and just by the general that you just everything, the level of respect for the manager was there. So it was even refreshing to see that. But yeah, let's talk about summer. We're still in the transfer window. It's gonna close in a few days now. But obviously, as Chelsea fans, we saw players we never thought we'd see leave the club, actually leave the club. There's so many to name. I'm not going to go through all of them. Otherwise, we'll be here all day, man. It's been that. Do you know what I mean? It's been crazy. And it's just based on what you said. Never would I have thought that all of the players, the majority of them that I felt were holding the club back, would actually leave this summer. And now we're here. So we're sort of or coming to the end of phase 1 into phase 2. And what I mean by that is, before people start going, oh no, the phase guy here, what I mean is we've sold a bunch of our players. Now it's the process of replacing them and bringing in what's right to fit the philosophy and fit a style of football. That's the transition that I'm currently talking about now. In terms of who we have brought in, the youth players who are not currently contributing to the first team, who will be playing at Strasbourg, and those that might be contributing to the first team going forward long term. How do you feel about what you've seen so far? Are you happy with what's been brought in?
Yeah, I mean, I said if you close the window now, considering the place that I came from and my views on everything, I would have a 10 out of 10 because we've got rid of the ones I wanted to get rid of. And the players that we've brought in, generally speaking, like especially 2 in particular, I'm over the moon about them. Like, so happy. Like, you can't, I keep telling people this because it's almost like this sort of thing where everyone's like not happy, always like they always try and find a way to not be happy about something. And you have to learn to walk before you can run. Yeah. And we are in a place where we always used to speak about the spine of the team. Like, we've really, really corrected that in a way, like the crux of it properly. And it remains to be seen because you need to let things play out like in real time to see how that works out. And if it's like, okay, maybe we should tweak this and tweak that. But generally speaking, we've not like danced around it. We've actually attacked it properly this time. And it feels so amazing. It's brilliant. So, yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with what's been done. I mean, there's still probably going to be another one after the goalkeeper that's brought in probably. But even so, I mean, the worst part of it is that makes things seem a little bit flat is literally the injuries, you know, especially to Nkunku. I mean, if he wasn't injured, like, I still, for what it's worth, even if he wasn't injured, I still think they'd still be looking at someone. But even if he wasn't injured, it would seem like a whole different landscape.
Absolutely.
People are just losing their minds. It's ridiculous, to be honest, because I think I'm really happy with the players we brought in. I can't think of any that I'm like, that looks like it could be a terrible signing. Or, you know, like last summer, for example, when we brought in Aubameyang, you could tell from the off it was terrible. Terrible. But like, there's nothing like that. It doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, and it also feels like, you know, if we're not getting certain targets, the next target we're looking at is pretty much an identical profile or very close to it. It's not just the scattergun approach per se. But is it fair to say, like, because I also like to ask this question, did you feel this summer was more about the emphasis had to be more on the outgoings than the incomings? I mean, it might seem like an obvious question, but some have actually said the reverse. No, the incomings were more important. I just want to get your perspective on that.
So I think the outgoings overall were very important, probably the most important thing, only rivaled by arrivals in a particular area in the midfield. I think that was probably to weigh it up in specifically the midfield, which we've done in a big way.
Yep.
But outside of that, all the outgoings are more important. That's how I look at it.
Absolutely, because, you know, with the midfield rebuild, that's something, you know, that we used to talk about all the time. Unfortunately, goes to show how long we've negated this area of the pitch. But we've been talking about this for years. You know, we need some defensive midfielders. We need a number 6. We need not just one, we need 2. We got our 2, Mike. Yeah, I'm just gonna actually just start straight there. Let's just get straight into the midfield. We got our 2, Caicedo, Romeo Lavia. two profiles that could potentially be elite defensive midfielders, number sixes in the future. So very exciting to see that. And, it just opens up to so many different tactical styles of football as well, just having the two of them. But one myth that I really want to address is this formation that we keep seeing out there of this 4-3-3 with Lavia sitting at the base and Caicedo and Enzo as a pivot. History will show you Pochettino does not favor that formation. He didn't favor that formation at PSG, really had Tottenham or whatever. Now, I'm not saying we're never going to see it ever. We might see it rear its head in-game tactically in a tactical switch. You never know. But in terms of actually seeing that on paper, but like, look, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a bit on a tangent here, but how do you think those two sort of, change things from a tactical perspective for Chelsea? What long-term are you looking forward in having those two midfielders in this squad?
Yeah, I mean, I'll even add to that. It's more than just two because there's also Leslie and there's also Andre Santos. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know which one's going to go out on loan yet. I still, people are like, oh, it's definitely going to be Leslie. And then it changes. It's definitely going to be Santos. I'm not sure. I think we'll hear maybe more next week. I think next week there's going to be pretty mental. So I would throw one of them in there as well. And it's great because it provides you with so many options because it's not even just like a case of Caicedo and then Lavia as his understudy. Like there's more than enough case where the two of them can play together. One of them could play with Enzo, which we'll probably see with Caicedo more often than not. And then you've got Lavia can play with him. And then you've got the likes of, say, like Leslie, if he stays as well, to play with one. Like there's so much. But one thing I would say is that just on paper, on the onset, our midfield has gone from like frail and weak to rejuvenated with like steel and guile. Like that's the main thing that I'm looking at. And I'm thinking like, okay, yeah, I feel like, I mean, you have to see it play out firsthand and like, don't even bother basing anything off of like Caicedo's like small cameo where he's like rusty as hell, hadn't played a preseason game forever. Trust me on this one, it will get to the point where it'll be like, yeah, I feel like this midfield can come up against anyone.
Yeah, 100%. And just as you're saying on Caicedo, like basing it on a player who's blatantly lacking match practice and like you rightly said, hadn't had a preseason. He'd been in London for the past week or so, waiting for his move to Chelsea to transpire. So obviously, no physical effort or any physical exercise was done during that time. So to throw him in that game was a little premature. But hey, listen, it's one of those ones. It is what it is. We'll chalk it to the game. You get me? But quite rightly, like you said, quite exciting. Does add a bit of steel, a bit of balls to our midfield. Something that a lot of us were agreeing we were missing. We were just getting bypassed too early. Last season, I found myself saying the same thing. Midfield, bypass. Too easy for all 19 teams in the Premier League to bypass that midfield. So it was do or die. That was the key thing before this window was open. That was the key thing that I had my eye on. This midfield rebuild, we've got to do it now and we've got to get it right. And we're lucky. We're actually in the process of this transition now. We're going to start to see these guys play together. But we've played 2 games already, Mike. We're about to play our third tomorrow. And you mentioned that you will be at the Bridge watching that game. I wish I was there with you. Unfortunately, I'm all the way in America, so can't make the game. But Liverpool 1-1, the back 5 formation, as some of us old school guys like to call it, or some will call it the back 3. We played against Liverpool. To many, it was understandable. The injuries had forced a tactical change in some ways. And also as well is when you look at the opposition that you're facing, although their team's not quite complete as well, there's several dangers on that pitch that you can't ignore. And we actually got lucky to not go 2 goals down at some point through one of those in Mo Salah. But the West Ham result, we get packed 3-1. There's a lot of controversy around that, a lot of different, opposing opinions. From what I'm hearing on the socials anyway, people are like, well, it's Pochettino's fault. Why did he go with the back 5? Why didn't he go with the back 4, etc., etc. What do you think's going on? Because we've seen in pre-season, the majority of it, we went with the back 4. Now we've gone into the back 5. But this is my thing. It's a back 5 on paper. But what my eyes are seeing on the pitch is it's a back 4. And and Chilwell is actually pushing up to play that left wing role. But why do you think Pochettino is doing this? Why do you think there's the diversion from what he did in pre-season to now in the opening of the season?
So there's a couple of things. I'll just go over the two games, like briefly. So with the back three thing, we only actually played a true back three in the first half against Liverpool. So basically, what I think the plan was basically to have like a box with our forward players, our midfielders, and then also the back three to pass out to them. However, the problem is that Liverpool's front three were very narrow and they pressed right up against our three centre backs. And then because they had no natural six, all three of the midfielders pushed up and outnumbered our midfield, right? So the only outlet was to the wing backs. And then that's why it came out to them, came back, and we were struggling. We couldn't get out. We could not get out. So what Pochettino did in the half time is he moved. He didn't really. It'd be hard to tell at first, but if you actually look at it, he moved Chilwell up to the left wing, and it went to what we call a standard 4-2-3-1, yeah, which is generally his default. Would you say?
Yeah.
Where Levi was playing as the left back, and Thiago Silva was playing as the left centre back, Sarsi right centre back, and then James / Gusto right back. Then what happened then is that the Salah followed Silva, or followed Levi, should I say, and then who was playing down the middle for them? Was it Jota? Jota followed Jota followed Silva, but then Diaz didn't know whether to follow Disasi or whether to follow James because everything had been shifted around. And that's why Enzo had so much control in that game in the second half, is because he became the free man and they could get it out to him and then he would pass it out and then we basically ran the thing. In the West Ham game, the same thing was deployed. Exactly the same thing was deployed where we had the 4-2-3-1, which is Poch's default. And Chilwell was the left attacking left midfielder, left forward, whatever you want to call it. And people were like, oh, he's playing because he wants to play for the width and all of this. And they were screenshotting and drawing circles of him like in the middle of the pitch. That's because he was told to do that. That's not him ignoring. If he ignored that, he'd be hooked straight away. He was told that he wasn't playing as a wing back. He was playing as an attacking midfielder. Now, there's a few reasons why he's probably doing that. The first one is trust. He probably doesn't trust the others that he has available to him through injury, because I honestly think if Nkunku wasn't injured, and obviously Carney, but he started the game, so let's go with all of them fit. I honestly think it would have been Jackson up front, it would have been Carney behind him, it would have been Sterling on the right, and it would have been Nkunku on the left. I generally think it probably would have been that. However, Nkunku obviously got injured. I don't think he trusts in order to carry out exactly right now what he wants in the others. You saw when Mudryk came on, he was lost. Doesn't mean he's a bad player. I'm not writing him off at all, okay? A lot of people are complaining because of that West Ham game, but the stuff that they don't really think, the stuff that they're complaining about doesn't really correlate, because the stuff that they're complaining about, we saw in the first half where we were all over them. All over them. As soon as those pieces got removed because of like the injury, etc., that's when we fell apart. Exactly. Now, I don't particularly like it with like Chilwell, and I expect him to play there tomorrow. You know, I mean, I could be wrong, but I get it, and I've got a line up on Twitter what I think it will be. But I understand why he's doing it because of limited option. And to be honest with you, right, I take solace in the fact that he could basically sub off Colwill and put Cucurella there as the left back. But I'm glad that he seems to be his go-to behind Chilwell as the left back is Colwill. Now, I'm happy about that because it means that I rate Colwill a lot higher even in that position than Cucurella. I think that's
facts.
That's a positive thing to take. Now, a lot of people are complaining about Colwill being shifted out to a position that he's not natural in. Well, that's not true because he's played left back before. And he's played in a back three before, when a true back three, when the outside centre back pushes right on almost like a left back. Exactly. People saying you're not getting the best out of his passing range, which is true. I understand that because you're moving him out. However, it's about who you play him with. This brings me on to another point where Silva is more of the issue in this respect than Colwill. So, for example, say we were doing exactly the same setup, Chilwell up there or not, but the back four.
Oh, hold on. Do you know what? I don't mean to cut you off, but I was actually going to talk about those two players of a separate issue, and you have mentioned them. One's Mudryk and one's Thiago Silva. Now, it's only because you've mentioned them both, I kind of want to stop and talk about them first and foremost.
Sure.
Now, I think it's very interesting what you say about Mudryk. Now, the fact that Ben Chilwell is being preferred to play that role, and while that is, Mudryk's natural role, a lot were asking, why are we not playing Mudryk there? And for me, at first I had the suspicion, but West Ham, after the emotions went away and I was able to look objectively, I saw that up here, he hasn't got the IQ yet, or I think IQ is a bit harsh. I think the understanding yet, the tactical aptitude to play in that position and understand what he's supposed to do. Because so many times you see certain runs not being made or the wrong option being chosen. There's so many things about it, but that's not to say at the same time about Mudryk that the potential is not there. He just needs some extra time to learn. Now, if he was 28, 29 years old, this is a serious problem that we're talking about here. But the fact that he's not, and he's a young player, there's time to develop him. And there are other options in that position naturally without the injuries that are going to take the pressure off him. And I think Chelsea had this in mind even before going into the season. They must have known this. If we're seeing this now, they must have known this a while ago. But Mike, I just want to get your take on Mudryk. Do you agree with what I'm saying, or do you slightly disagree?
100%. So people look at it too simplistically. Sorry, butchered that word. So like they go Mudryk left winger, so should play. But this is what I mean. And then they're complaining about his cameo because he's not ready. Like the one thing I'd say about Pochettino is he beds in young players, especially in attacking areas, very, very slowly. I remember with Spurs, when Son arrived, he did not put him straight in. Son was very much a bit part player. He was very much second fiddle to Nasser Chadli. Nasser Chadli was the main player on that left-hand side throughout that season. It wasn't until as the season progressed in European competitions, etc., that Son found his way in. He's very, very gradual with that, and I expect him to do exactly the same with Mudryk, obviously injury permitting. You could tell when he came on, it looked dysfunctional. Sure, Carney coming off had a lot to do with that. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I get it. You compare the two, and everyone's like, oh, Chilwell didn't score. Like, isn't that what you're talking about and stuff? But if you look, go back and watch it. I always employ people to go back and watch things properly. Like I used to say this about our midfield when people used to deny it being cut apart, right? Go back and watch it properly. The amount of off-ball runs that Sterling and Chilwell were doing and creating the space, that's all part of what it is. And the thing is with Pochettino, it's like a double-edged sword. With any manager, by the way, and this is not I feel sorry for him because every manager at top club has to do this.
Yeah,
you have to develop the players in the squad, be it young or not, and able to follow your instruction. But at the same time, you need to put together a team that can follow your instruction and try and win it because you believe in yourself enough that the way that you're instructing them will get you the results. Now, sure, Chilwell's vice captain, sure, but people are like, oh, that's why he's playing. Like, it might have something to do with it, probably because that's why he is vice captain, but it's not the only reason. Enzo is the vice captain as well. So if he wasn't playing, Enzo would have the armband, just like he did when Chilwell went off. So that's nonsense. But listen to what people are saying. Like when people complain, like think about what you're complaining about. You're complaining about that second half. In that second half, it was a totally different picture. Wind back the clock and watch that first half. We were all over them. All over them. I promise you, we didn't lose that game because the penalty miss. We lost it because Carney got an injury. I promise you.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate as well because Carney finally showing us, glimpses of what a lot of us thought he could develop into. Very well taken goal, but as soon as he went down and he couldn't walk on his own off the pitch, we knew what time it was, man. And it's very unfortunate. I actually done a video with Lee Gunner discussing about, injuries in the game at the minute. Have they gone up or has it always been like this or whatever? And I feel, and Lee Gunner, we both feel like there has been a spike more in injuries, and in particular types of injuries. They seem to be like knee injuries and ligament damage as well, like serious injuries. I mean, do you feel the same or do you feel different?
Yeah, I do. I think it's the same. It's not just us. Obviously we've been plagued with it, but you look across the league, you look across other leagues. Big players going down. Key players in squads. I think it has a lot to do with. Over the last few years, some of these players have played so much. I think as well that there's stuff like pre-season tours. I think a lot of that's not taken into consideration properly. I think it's the condition of a lot of pitches, and that just doesn't go for just at match day pitches. I reckon on training pitches as well. I'm not just talking about Cobham, because the Cobham pitches are generally quite good.
Yep.
I don't know how they compare to some other ones, but most Premier League ones are of a particular standard. But obviously teams train in different places, especially when they travel to Europe. They travel out a day early, and then they go, or a couple of days early, to train out there. There's so many different things, and I think it's just all caught up with them. And you look at like Aston Villa, Tyrone Mings went down, and he's got really bad injuries. So Coutinho, they happened to be on the same tour as us when we were out in America. Like, I'm not saying it's a coincidence or anything, but there's some method in it. Do you know what I mean? I think that it's just a combination of all those things.
Well, I can tell you firsthand from being in America. I mean, it's going to be my 10th year this December.
Mm-hmm.
I've played on a lot of pitches. I've also coached here as well, and I've done it at the highest youth level to grassroots level. The majority of the fields here are not to standard that's going to be good for your joints, and I think I'm saying it quite kindly. Yeah, so it's no surprise to me. Even the game when Nkunku got the injury, you saw even the players before the game, they were testing out the pitch, and you can see a few of them shaking their head because of the texture of how hard it was. The ground was solid, rock hard. So that's not good for anyone. And the thing is we had a previous situation like this with Ruben Loftus-Cheek. That's how he done his Achilles. Same thing, hard ground, terrible ground that they're playing on, nonsensical decisions like that. But anyway, let's move on from there, and we'll continue to discuss the rest of the squad. Now, I know we did mention Thiago Silva, but there's one more player I wanted to speak about real quick before we go on to Thiago Silva. Nicholas Jackson.
Yep.
What is his profile to you? What does he naturally look like to you on the pitch?
So I was talking to my friend earlier, and we were doing player comparisons. And do you know who he most reminds me of? He reminds me of a young, pre-injury plagued Danny Welbeck.
Okay.
Think about it. The way he plays in terms of his build, the way he moves, his speed, his directness, but also because I always say this, he has the ability to play as an outside forward. And Poch basically said that in his interview he did, I think, with Sky. I honestly think if Breuer was available, and maybe we'll see this is just me guessing, because I know Poch is a massive fan of him and he really wants to work with him more. I honestly think that you could see a situation if they're both on the pitch at the same time, where you have Breuer as the 9 and Jackson will be off the left or something. I generally think, whether that's in game where there's a sub made or from the off, I generally think that's the case. I think Breuer will play a lot, and I think Jackson will play off that side as well. Again, we talk about the likes of Chilwell playing as that position at the moment. It's a lack of options. It's a lack of players that he trusts in order to fulfill what he's asking at the moment. That's not to say these players could never do it. It's just that's what he's working with.
No, I don't disagree with you. And I've said a few times now, the more I watch him, it's just becoming more evident to me. I feel like he is that kind of inside forward player that you play off the left, because he does like to drift there and cut in from that left side. He does like to do that. And even when Christopher Nkunku was in the squad, you could see like a lot of the time Nkunku was taking up the center forward position at times, and Nkunku was the one that was creating off the wings, out of the sides, and bringing it into Nkunku. So I think, even as well, it's all coming back to Nkunku, isn't it? Like, taking him out of the squad, I think you take a bit away from Nicholas Jackson as well in doing so. So there is evidence there, at least enough for me to suggest that he's better playing off somebody or playing with a kind of partner. I think that's definitely his strengths.
So one thing I would say about Pochettino, when he does a setup, generally speaking, I know he is somewhat flexible, but he generally will play with like some form of 10s, whether it is an actual back three, like, with like when we started against Liverpool, where it was a 3-4-2-1, or the more standard 4-2-3-1. His 10, they move around a lot. They're not like fixed. They do move around a lot around the place, right? Very close together. what I would say about the 10, the one essentially behind the striker, he likes that player to play very close to the striker, almost like a second striker at
Second
times.
striker,
Yeah, so that's why he mentioned it himself. Like you're 100% right with what you're saying. He mentioned how much of a miss Nkunku is, because even if there was a situation where I said that Nkunku could be playing off the left in one game and then with Jackson up top, you'd still see that, that sort of asymmetrical square that you'd get, triangle you'd play between them. Like I feel like that. Like you look at the Spurs side, yeah, Dele Alli was so close to Kane. Like he was literally like a second striker.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and even at Southampton, I think it was Adam Lallana was right behind Ricky Lambert. Like they were very close together, and that's why people. It's funny the way people look at like tens, if you like, that position, if you like. You got a lot of people talking now where they're like, "Oh, we need someone who's like going to be like our Mata or something like that," but they don't take into account what it is. I'm sure Pochettino would love a prime Mata. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying he wouldn't, but you need to look at what our manager's doing, and he likes that. He likes partnerships, and he likes that partnership to have with the striker and the player behind him. I actually think as well. I can see what he's doing with Sterling, and I can see it. Like I could see in the West Ham game. Obviously, it comes down to the player himself, but I can see what he's saying to him. People are thinking like, "Oh, he's trying to get the Sterling that was at Manchester City back." But the Manchester City Sterling, even then, even when he was performing well, was very different. I think he's trying to get him like he was when he was at Liverpool, where he basically was very, very much in between the lines, very direct. And I could honestly see a situation, be it in game after some substitutions, or maybe from the off. I don't know yet. This is just me guessing, but what I'm looking at, I could see a situation where Sterling is playing behind the striker as well, because he's very good between the lines. I genuinely do. And obviously, because some teams have used Sterling as a striker, rightly or wrongly. He's better when he's got someone with him. So do you remember, like in the 2018 World Cup, when Sterling played just behind Kane?
Okay, Harry Kane,
similar situation. The best or the only way to use him. It's just an option. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a situation where that happened. I think in the game, I know we were just throwing players on at the end because we were trying to get the win. So like Mason Burstow and stuff came on. But right at the end of the game, or near the end of the game, he was essentially playing that. He was playing behind. I think at one point, before Gusto was taken off, he was playing behind Noni and Jackson. Essentially, like he used to play behind Sturridge and Suarez in that Liverpool side at the time, and he used to play at the top, didn't he? So I could see, because like Pochettino's players behind the striker, from left to right, they're all, unless they're specifically told so, they're generally all quite close, and they all go between the lines.
They interchange.
Yeah. So I could see that being a situation as well that he might use. I don't know, like be it in game or from the off, definitely.
No, that's interesting. So there's still, oh man, it's this Nkunku is such a key piece in this, which is why fans, unfortunately, unless we address that position there and we bring in another signing, but it's two things remain true. That new signing is not going to be Christopher Nkunku, and the second thing is until we sign that player, we don't know what his strengths are. Therefore, we don't know what his role is going to be in that quote unquote 10 role, that 10 space, because there's so many different roles a 10 can have, quite rightly, like you said. There's the second striker role that's closer to the striker. Then you've got your traditional attacking midfielder and so on and so forth. Just depends what your strengths are. But we're going to move a few positions further back in the pitch. The reason why I wanted to leave Thiago Silva as one of the last players that I wanted to talk about is because this guy has got me so much backlash from the socials, even on this channel, just from my thoughts on the guy. Now, I have to emphasize again, I almost have to do these disclaimers for these players, but the short time he's been here, he's been a fantastic servant for Chelsea. No doubt he's been a success, but like absolutely everything, we saw it with Ivanovic, we saw it with Didier Drogba, we've seen it with players that have contributed a hell of a lot more respectfully than what he has to the club. No different for him. You cannot cheat time. And what I mean by that is as you age, respectfully, you're more susceptible to injuries. You want to avoid putting yourself in situations where you're stretching yourself to 90 to 100%. because that's how you're going to get a tear. Remember, you're older than the young kids. You're not going to get away with certain things no more. There's also the case of, you know, it's a lot of it comes down to his age. Actually, I can't, in terms of quality, right? If you was to ask him to do a deep lying job where we're sitting and you're trying to defend the box and you don't have to push too far forward and stuff, he has his uses. But to rely on a 38-year-old player, respectfully, I know he's one of the few quote unquote senior players in terms of age in the club, but relying on him as heavily as a lot of our fan base wants to, I think is a very, 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 very dangerous thing to do. But before I even elaborate on that, let me get your thoughts on Thiago Silva first and foremost, his role in this team currently, well, and what it's supposed to be actually.
Yeah, so I echo your sentiment about him as a person. I don't know him personally, but I certainly wouldn't have put him in the bracket as I used to put other players like your Alonsos or your Jorginhos or your Kepas and stuff. No way. Like I don't think so. I think he's probably a great guy. And like you saw it as well when Chilwell came off and he tried to give him the armband, but he said no, give it to Enzo. Like that's like I respect.
He's
stuff
acknowledged,
like that.
he's acknowledging what's coming
Exactly.
forward. Yeah, he's a proper man. Yeah, respectfully, he knows.
100%. And he's clearly an incredible player, and he certainly was back in the day. 100%. Like he, you know, like from probably one of the best of his generation. Like no doubt about it. But however, as you rightfully said, all good things must come to pass. And I think that, in all honesty, we probably shouldn't have extended his contract. I think it was probably time for him to move on at the end of this juncture with this sort of refresh of the slate sort of thing. And I like to think he's only playing because Badashile isn't back yet. Now, I'll just quickly go back to the point I mentioned about Colwell earlier, about playing left back. It's not an issue with him playing there. You know, I'm sure he's much better in the middle. I'm sure, 100%. But as like a secondary option or the option behind Chilwell, it's not too bad because you see lots of players do it now. Like you see Ben White do it. You see Dan Burn do it. You see, you saw Tommy Asu do it the other night for Arsenal. You see John Stones do it. Like Kanji, I could go on and on and on. It's not a weird thing. You don't see their fans going, "Oh, we're playing a back three," just because they build up in one. It doesn't mean it at all. It's about who's playing next to him. So people are saying, yes, you're taking away Colwell's exceptional passing. But if you have Badashile next to him, you negate that because his passing is unbelievable. Probably the best, in my opinion, right now, he's probably the best centre-back at the club in terms of all-round, like in terms of his positioning, his reading of the game, his passing, everything. But on Silva, the most obvious thing to say about is obviously his legs. Pochettino, his teams like to press high in a more controlled way. It's not quite the same as like Klopp, but, all pressing is different. But his teams like to press. And the problem is, and this is where Lampard and other coaches, maybe like Gerrard, used to go so wrong. If you press and there's a pressing trigger for the front player or one of the players near the front, the whole team has to go. You can't have a situation where the midfielders and the forwards press and then the defense doesn't push up with them because you're not compact enough. And then that's where you leave space.
Vulnerability.
Exactly. So unfortunately, Thiago Silva in one-off situations, I'm sure he could do it, but it's the consistency of it. That's the issue.
Exactly. Thank you for understanding that, man. That's where my issue is. It's the consistency of relying on him to do it over 38 games in this season. Yeah. It's madness. You can't do it. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go on.
It's totally fine. And then, that's the thing. And unfortunately, he's at a situation. And I used to get so annoyed at your Jorginhos and your Kovacic's specifically here. He's at a situation where, because he's such a great player, or he was such a great player with such a great legacy, and I'm not saying the other two were, by the way, this is where the comparison ends. I'm just using it for him. He's built up this reputation and so right, and fair enough, okay? But the problem is he's now at a situation with the way that he plays, be it off ball or on ball, where he unfortunately makes others around him look worse. And they bring out the worst traits in them, right? So you talk about Colwell. Colwell's traits that maybe he needs to work on a bit, especially if he's going to be playing in that position, maybe when Badashile is back, or not all the time, but in some situations. It's not like a calmness because he has to watch out for Silva. He has to cover him. He has to make sure he's got him. And Silva can't get across quick enough. The same way with Disasi. He's received a lot of flack over the last few weeks. And Is he perfect? No, absolutely
No.
not. But he's nowhere near as bad as people are making out. Nowhere near. Like, should he have done better on the goal Antonio scored? Yes. Should Colwell have done better? Yes. But Silva, if you watch him, his communication,
He's the
his
culprit, yeah.
positioning, he is nowhere. He commits way too early. Way too early. The other issue as well with Silva is that he's really slow on the ball. He's got slower, very slow. He doesn't release it quick enough.
Yep.
And Pochettino bangs on about it, and he said it today, I think, in one of those interviews. The main thing with him, irrespective of formation, is diagonal up the pitch, be it across or just straight through the middle along the carpet. He wants to get the ball from back to front as quickly as possible, and it's detrimental. And I'm hoping, because he has to play a fine game, because he doesn't want to disrespect the bloke, because he is, a lot of people do look up to him. A lot of players
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm sure he gets on with him one-on-one. He probably has a load of respect from him. They're not that far apart in age, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
They might have even come up against each other, to be honest. Like the way that I think Silva came up against Lampard, for example, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm hoping the only reason why he's playing so much is because, one, maybe, Disasi's very new. He's like literally just come into the league, but also because Badashile is out, and obviously Fofana as well, which sucks, but mainly Badashile. And I'm hoping when he's fit and he's ready to go and he's eased back in, like maybe via a cup game or something, he eventually displaces him. Where if we have Colwell playing left back, or a situation where Disasi becomes more adept to the league, it becomes him and Colwell playing together, and then Chilwell as the left back or something like that. Badashile and Silva really takes a back seat eventually. That's what I'm hoping happens, but we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna have to wait and see. And for me, it's again echoing what you said. Nothing's knocking the bloke, and nothing's knocking how quality he has been throughout his entire career. But I just think having him as an option right now is more of a hindrance than it is from a tactical perspective, like you said. Then it does yield more positives. And I'm sure a lot of you that are very much against what we're saying, I'm pretty sure there will be in the comments. Later on, you will come to see this for yourself. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's not right. It's not fun spotting things early. Yeah, but eventually you know that people will see it. But let's obviously we're coming into like the last 10 minutes or so. I'm not trying to keep you up for too long. I know it's late over there, but let's talk about tomorrow's game. Newly promoted Luton. I've always said I don't like to play newly promoted teams, and I never take them for granted. But for me, I'm still optimistic regardless of that. We are playing at Stamford Bridge. We do have a good history against Luton. And speaking of Luton, actually, I have to actually plug this video. So I've done an interview with Tyler on his channel. He is an actual Luton fan. Him and his dad. Big up Tyler. Hannah was also there. I'm gonna link that in the description. Make sure you go and follow Tyler's channel and support him as well. Help him grow, man. Get his numbers up. But yeah, I am still a little optimistic about this game going forward. But first of all, let us know how you feel going into this game. Do you see us getting our first win in the season here? And how do you feel? In fact, you know what? I'm going to do but one better. I'm going to let you answer that question first. I've got your formation that you put on Twitter. Do you mind me putting it up here on? Okay, cool. So I'll first of all, I'll start off with your question. How do you feel going into this game? Optimistic?
Yeah, I think we will win this game. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to be like smooth sailing or anything. No Premier League game ever is. There's always a moment or two. But I think, there's a little bit kind of air of, because we didn't win against, West Ham. I think that was the main one. I think a draw against Liverpool first game, okay, fine. We should have won it, which was what a lot of people take from it. But I've seen enough to know, like the way we played football mainly. That's because that's the main thing I'm looking for in like that first half, when the team that he put out and the idea that he had there was in full flow. And obviously the second half against Liverpool, it's enough for me to go, this is going to happen eventually. Like the law of average will tell you that we will find a way through. It's not like the opposite where we're riding our luck, where it's like we're scraping by on these wins, but we don't deserve them. We will get there. And I do think we will win. I think we'll probably win I've gone for like a 2-0, like personally, but I think it will be a convincing win. I'm not saying it won't be difficult. We won't have moments, but it'll be like, yeah, it's fair enough. Chelsea win. They deserve to win.
Yeah. In fact, I'll go as far to say this. I'm that optimistic that I believe these next 5-6 games are all winnable games for us. To be honest with you, we've got an all right run. We'll talk about that obviously a few minutes after this. But here's your lineup. Well, not your personal choice, but as it says there, your guess as to what Pochettino is going to do tomorrow.
Yeah.
Interesting here. To those of you that have been watching the video throughout and you haven't just skipped to this part, we've spoken about, Poch's kind of tactical outlook. So this does make sense based on what you're saying. So Sanchez in goal, Levi, Colwill, Silva, Disasi, and Gusto as the back four. Caicedo and Fernandez, a pivot that brings me so much joy to be able to say for the first time in that midfield. The three in front of them, Ben Chilwell on the left, Conor Gallagher as the attacking midfielder, or number 10. Raheem Sterling keeping his position in that right wing, had an excellent game against West Ham. One of the best I've seen of Raheem Sterling for an actual long while, so definitely deserves that. And Nicholas Jackson leading the line. So not too much of a change from West Ham outside of obviously the Chukwuemeka situation forces the change, and obviously Caicedo coming in would have forced the change naturally anyway. But just those two changes there.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you, I don't disagree. I can see Pochettino kind of going back to this now. Conor Gallagher's been getting a lot of stick. I'm not going to be a hypocrite, myself included. I see his uses in the team 100%. But if I feel that there's several players with a bit more quality out there that have the same profile, that are potentially available, I say go and get those. That's my stance on Conor Gallagher. I don't think long-term he's that guy for me personally. But what do you think of Conor Gallagher? Is he getting a bit of unfair stick?
So it's funny. My answer is yes and no. So yes, he gets unfair stick from particular sections of the online fan. I dread to call them fan base, but you know the ones I mean, because of just the sort of player he is. The guy he could score double-digit goals and they would still have a problem with him. The reason why I say no is because, and it's not his fault, over his Chelsea career since he's been back from Palace, he's been played in situations that just not getting the best out of him. Even though he played well against Liverpool and he played okay against West Ham, especially in that first half, no one really played badly. He's just doing what he's asked to do. And that's why the manager loves him. And that's why pretty much every manager loves him, because he will do exactly what you tell him to do, even if it's out of his comfort zone. Now, I'm hoping tomorrow he does play the 10 because, people, again, this is what I mean, number of people who I think are very not narrow-minded, but I just think they lack so much nuance when you talk about football. They're like, oh, he's a player that can't pass the ball or he doesn't do the pass. But that you don't look at the strengths that he would bring and what Pochettino would be looking at. Just go back and watch him when he was at Palace. He was pretty much playing as an attacking midfielder. He was ridiculous. He was their most lethal player, really.
Player of the season as well.
Him and Zaha, yeah. And people talk about we don't get enough goals, we don't have enough shots on goal. Well, the guy hasn't been put in positions in order for him to do that. Now, if he gets a run in the team and he's in positions to do that and he's tasked with it and he's not delivering, fine. I'll be one of the first people to sit here and call him out. But you can't call something out when you have first-hand evidence of the player being able to do it, but you haven't seen it for your own 2 eyes in our own team. Now, I have no issue with him staying at all. No issue at all with him staying, as long as I knew almost exclusively that he was going to be played is one of those attacking positions, primarily the middle. But
right.
And I don't mean nailed on starter, because obviously we're talking about when other players come back from injury. I would be absolutely fine with it because I think he offers something that some of the others don't offer. And essentially, I've always said he wants to be here. He wants to play. He's homegrown. He was free. I mean, there's so many things that, he'll do whatever the manager tells him to do. I don't see really much of a bad side with him. It's just the way that he's used, I think, is the most, but it works against him the same way maybe it used to work against Mason Mount, where he'll do exactly what the manager tells him to do. He's always available. He's never injured. He'll play as long as you tell him to play. He'll never want to come off. He's never really tired. So it works against him, but it's not his fault, if that makes sense.
No, I hear you. I hear you. And really, this is it's either the first time or one of very few times we're actually seeing him. If he does go with this, and I actually feel he will go with this, but this will be the first time really we'll see Conor Gallagher operating in the areas comfortably and quite rightly, like you said. And while he was at Palace, he was, you know, he was adding something to that team that we are desperate for from that position, and that is goals. Because Conor Gallagher had a reputation over there for being able to, you know that position that he used to pick right outside the box. You gave him any space there, ping, it's a goal, or at bare minimum, he's testing a goalkeeper.
Exactly.
We need that in our team. So maybe him playing in this natural position will, you know, will encourage him to go for them opportunities again, to find him in those positions that he was so comfortable in finding the goal in. So I think it's a bit of, if he does do this, it might be a bit of a rebirth for Conor Gallagher, because you know, I certainly don't want to see him in the pivot with Enzo and, you know, Enzo and himself. But obviously we know that was down to Pochettino not quite trusting Andre Santos yet and the youngsters. And to have Gallagher is really the only realistic senior option to play there. But hopefully going forward, just like you said, if he does have to stay at Chelsea, then keep him operating in those attacking positions only. Do you know what I mean? But for me, long term, I still think that we should still be looking at something that is a bit more, you know, respectfully, someone who's got a bit more talent, who's a bit more capable of playing in that position, perhaps a little more versatile, add both goals and assists to the team from there. And all that.
I mean, the thing is if Nkunku was fit, then
nailed on.
Exactly, he'd be nailed on starting in there anyway. Like, I know I mentioned about the left hand side, but there's more chance he'd start in there. And again, even Chukwuemeka, like, do you know what I mean? There is options there. It's just that it doesn't feel like we have them because of the injuries, and we haven't been able to see them progress, especially with our new midfield. It's just really frustrating. But I hope, like you said, he takes the ball by the horns if he is played in that position, and he ends up sort of being like, well, I'm valuable to this team. I can definitely add something. The same way like Harry Kane did literally under Pochettino, where he started scoring in the Europa League, and it was like, you're gonna have to put him in because the others aren't delivering. You know, that would be amazing for us, because he'd be a free player. He's not someone we've bought. It'd be fantastic. But I've longed to see the opportunities given to him that he was afforded at Crystal Palace, with the correct base behind him, and then allowing him to get into the correct positions that, in my opinion, gets the best out of him, because it will get the best out of the team. Now, obviously, like, I know he played in like an 8, but it was a very advanced 8. He was rarely involved in the build-up play. It was very much final third sort of player, you know, that asymmetrical, if you like. That's essentially what the role he would almost be given here, where he'd have that responsibility. But, you know, he'd have the others very close to him. Like I said, the way that Pochettino likes to work, you know, between the lines, I think it would be essentially a great opportunity. And I hope that is what he goes with. But the reason why I've just gone with the one change, essentially, is because one thing that Pochettino, I know he likes, and really we should like as well, because we've been sick of so many lineup changes over the last few years. He likes to try and keep it as consistent as possible, so players can gel more and, like, you have relationships more and build up partnerships, so that in the future, if things do change, they have that connection.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
That's why the only different I could see, you know, and it's very possible, is that one of the centre backs drops out, be it you know, any of the three. You know, let's go with Silva or Disasi or whatever, and then Chilwell gets pulled back into the left back, and then maybe he starts Noni on the other side, and then he starts Sterling. You know, that's a possibility. But I just think, from what I know of the guy and the way we've been playing, especially in that first half when he put out that side, I think this is my guess on what I think might happen.
Okay. You've given your score prediction. I think you said 2-0, didn't you?
Yeah.
2-0 is your score prediction.
Sterling and Chilwell, I'm going to go with.
I'm gonna go 3-1. I'm going to be optimistic and say Nicholas Jackson will get his goal. He'll get his first Premier League goal.
Love it.
I want to say Raheem Sterling as well. I think after he definitely deserves a goal. If he picks up off the back of that performance at West Ham, I think naturally he's going to get it anyway. So I think Sterling will get it. And we always have a defender score a goal. And my luck and how it is for me at every time, if I have a criticism of a player, that player will always turn around and score and almost give me a middle finger at the same time. I'm going to go Thiago Silva to score a header off a corner just to say the sweet fuck you, Ash. Do you know what I mean? Fuck you, Guni. I heard what you said. Well, nah. Either way, man, I'll be happy. I'll be happy, man. 3-1 will be good for me. 2-0, whatever. 3 points, just bring them. But Mike, I've got your social media details in the description, so people make sure you do give Mike a follow. But just let the people know what you talk about on your spaces and when they can catch you, or is it a case of they have to follow you and have notifications on? Just let them know.
Either way, I don't really have any kind of set times when I do it. I used to do spaces a lot more, to be fair, but you know, life is life. I try and do them as much as possible. I've been trying to up them a little bit more towards the end of this the transfer window and the beginning of the new season, especially with like the optimism that surrounds us compared to like, you know, previous years. But yeah, no, just literally it's on the screen there, the green _3101. Just give me a follow. I mean, I'm quite blunt, so if there's anything you see that maybe we don't see eye to eye on, like, just bear with it. Spaces, I always welcome anyone who wants to speak or chat, just generally just about stuff going on at Chelsea. Maybe if I've heard something, or, you know, I might drop it in there and talk about something and my view on it, kind of like how me and Guni have been chatting here, really, like what's relevant at the time, after a couple of days after a game. Maybe we'll talk about stuff before a game, just general chat, you know, like that kind of thing. Nothing like too heavy or specific. Always open for good debates and everything, and to not to change people's minds, but I like seeing other people's points of view, and then hopefully they could maybe see my one as well.
There you go, people. And it's one I would 100% recommend. This one that I always look out for, and I try and tune in every time it's on. Even when I'm at work, I still try and have a listen. So I'd highly suggest you guys to give Mike a follow on Twitter, as well as myself. I don't know if you can see my name tag on the screen, but that is my Twitter over there. I'm not going to lie to you people. Yeah, get me paid for my tweets. It's free for you. You get me? Yeah, more followers, the better. Let's do this, fam. You know, Guni will keep it real with you guys at all times on this channel. You get me? But Mike, we're definitely going to have you back on the channel. We've got a lot of football to discuss. Next time, I'm actually going to ask you where you think Chelsea will finish, or where you'll expect them to finish. I'm not going to ask you right now because I don't like being asked this question while the transfer window is still open. I like to be asked that question when the window's closed and we know what not just our team, every other team around us is working with, because there are variables that we cannot control, but we unfortunately have to take into consideration before we can start talking about league finishes. So I think it makes more sense to bring you on again and then ask you that question. But thank you very much, Mike, for joining in. Always great talking football with you. Once again, people, if you're new to the platform, smash that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up, get us up to 20K. Let's be honest, get us up to 20K subscribers. We're almost there. Leave your thoughts down there in the comments. I will be going through them. I will be responding to them as well. But people, stay safe. Bless.